Hi there. I'm going to do a review for Ghostbusters 2. This movie came out in 1989, and sort of like the first movie, stars big same basic cast of characters. Ivan Reitman is the one who directed it, Harold Ramis, and and Dan Aykroyd. Writers starring the likes of Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Sigourney Weaver, Harold Ramis, and Ricker Moranis, Annie Potts. This movie's got a slightly bigger cast of characters than the first one because, of course, they had already established who was going to be there. Bill Murray stars as Peter Bankman, Dan Aykroyd's Raymond Stantz, Sigourney's playing Dana, there's Egon, there's Winston. This movie has a slight disadvantage. It's got some advantages over the first movie and slight disadvantages. This movie is able to run the storyline quicker because they don't have to introduce any of the Ghostbusters. The problem with this movie, though, is that it starts off with this idea that the Ghostbusters don't have apparently are not believed by anybody. Apparently, they went out of business because they were both sued and they're considered crackpots, which is ironic, considering the fact that I would think it wouldn't have happened, but I guess because of the way they ended the first movie, they had to find a plot point for this movie, so they had to do this concept of what this was going to be. Starts off with the fact that Dana's walking around. She's got a kid now, apparently, and she's rolling that kid around, and some slime oozes up out of the ground, and her stroller hits the slime, and yeah, it ends up taking off on its own at some point. And this opens up a whole sequence of events because it ends up stopping at a certain spot. And of course, she alerts the Ghostbusters, who are all in disarray right now because, of course, they lost their original job. Now they're doing all these other things. Egon is trying to be a science guy per se. Peter's running a talk show of sorts. I don't even. Ray, and Winston are both trying to be, I guess, doing sidekicks as for birthday parties with an unusual scene. The scene is kind of what props it up. Is that one of the kids tells them that says that my dad thinks you're full of it and that's why you went out of business, which again is a very unusual pile of dialogue for a movie where it was literally proven that there were ghosts in New York City a few years earlier. But whatever, this is the way it runs it. This is the way it plays it. So we got to run with this. We got to run with this story. Nonetheless, they do a big operation to get underneath this city on the avenue where the baby stopped, and they find out that basically there's a stream of ooze underneath the city. And it's so funny because they all get into trouble for this. The city police find out that, of course, they're not supposed to be there, and they cause a big kerfuffle that puts the power out and gets them into a court case. What's the significance of the court case is that this is the moment that opens up the fact that indeed they are the Ghostbusters and that the ghosts are real. It's a thing. It's been proven beyond reasonable doubt now. And this movie kind of runs with that. Also, where Dana works now is the art museum, and her headmaster is basically he brings in a new painting. Um, this is kind of like the difficult thing to imagine. Of course, this painting is, of course, cursed. There's an evil entity in the painting. Now, whether or not it's actually Vigo of the old days, Vigo of the days, I don't know. It's hard to say whether or not it's an actual a painting that's been cursed by an actual character of the past, or it's a demon portraying that character. A little bit difficult to tell. I think it's more or less just a demon that's portraying him because I can't imagine that random dictators from the past, like this guy, would show up out of nowhere in a painting. Nonetheless, is the ugliest painting you ever want to see. I don't know why anybody would bring a painting like this in. Nonetheless, yeah, it's kind of a peculiar scene. And and of course I don't know what he does. He hypnotizes the guy into being his one of his secondhand guy, basically his man for doing his deeds. And not only that, things are happening. They basically Dana tells them about the painting, and they come and do an investigation into it. And of course, the investigation turns a little awkward. It's rather interesting how this movie works. I preferred actually the original. I preferred Gozer because Gozer was a definite god of the old world in the first movie, whereas in this movie, Vigo the Carpathian is like he's just a dictator. He's just a guy. Whether or not he was, maybe he was a demon. Maybe he was a demon that came back and ruled over the parts of Europe. Was it Romania or whatever? I think that's where it's supposed to be. Nonetheless, they have this. They have that unique problem. Of course, they find ends up becoming. They end up finding out about the ooze underneath the ground, and the ooze ends up having all these qualities now. It's basically a puddle of energy collecting underneath the city for New York. The bad energy of New York City is collecting into the city, and this is the beauty of this movie is that this ooze has been building up, and of course nobody has apparently noticed this stuff, but of course it took over this old abandoned tunnel, this subway tunnel or train tunnel or whatever, and that was the entire point of this movie. The movie does have some peculiar facts in it about the fact that once the Ghostbusters come back, there's a bunch of news reporters talking about different things, including one bringing up the fact that his grandma used to have stories of an old locomotive that used to run by the area, and of course this is a scene in this movie as this locomotive does happen, so we do know that this is a real thing that did happen. So it's not just a story; it's actually a real thing. But nonetheless, it's beauty. It's a beautiful thing. The movie is actually, I think it's a bit, I don't know, it's not as funny as the first one. It really runs out of humor really quick. It just does not know how to have the humor of the first movie. The first movie worked great as a pure raw comedy. This movie here has troubles with that because I think their plot is I think their humor is exhausted. They're playing this a little bit more straight than the first movie. This movie here has a little bit more trouble with the playing the straight part. Um, Basically, they're dealing with the fact that the ooze is coming up. It's connected to Vigo. Of course, it's energy for him to turn back into human. And of course, he wants Dana's baby because that's going to be his edifice for returning to the world. Not sure how he's going to take over the world in the form of a child, but whatever. That's just the way it runs. And this movie also contains some rather interesting caricatures of the fact that once the ooze comes aboard the world, it encases the art museum. And the Ghostbusters find out they have to use the ooze in order to awaken Lady Liberty. And that's the amusing part of the movie, is that there's a little bit more advanced visual effects in this movie. It does have its share of problems. I'm not sure it ever rectifies all of them. There's rather cute scenes in this movie. The one thing that does happen is the secretary, what's her face, played by Annie Potts, Janine. In this movie, she looks a lot more like the cartoon Janine than she did in the first movie. In the first movie, they had no idea what Janine should look like, so they just made her a really plain Jane secretary looking. Whereas in this movie, Janine had taken on a certain image from the cartoon, so this Janine looks a lot more like the cartoon. Her glasses and her hair are much more similar to that character, so that they're a rather ironic thing. And that makes the whole movie a little bit more, it makes the movie, I guess maybe that's the reason why they didn't have to have so much comedy in this movie, because the Ghostbusters cartoon had been on for quite a few years, so they didn't have to have quite as much comedy, because the storylines had already been set. Maybe the kids didn't need that much comedy, I don't know. All I know is the movie's a little bit dry. Nonetheless, they do figure out how to defeat Vigo. They have to, the painting that he comes in, he basically comes out of that painting, and they have to use their blasters in order to get him back in and destroy the painting. Again, I don't know if he's actually supposed to represent the real Vigo or an actual demon or maybe Vigo was a demon. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. Um, the pink slime produces some interesting things. It also produced an interesting scene when they were trying to develop the photography because they had taken some pictures underneath um, the when they had taken some pictures of the painting. Um, of course, it shows the Valley of Slime, and then all that spontaneously combusts, so it does produce some rather interesting shots, rather peculiar scenes. I don't know. This movie is a little bit trying to be a little bit more scary than the first movie. I think they were doing that on purpose, just to get more amped up. But also, the one thing they did wrong in this movie, the score in this movie is terrible. The first movie was very much a contemporary music movie. And this movie, because the contemporary music is all punk music and all rap music, it doesn't work. The music in this movie is just terrible. It does not fit the movie at all. I don't know why they used it, but I guess they felt like they had to deal with the punk, the punk rock and the punk and the reggae scene from the late '80s, as opposed to what the early '80s was. Because I guess that's how much music had changed in New York City. But nonetheless, yeah, this movie, a fairly good follow-up to Ghostbusters. I think it's underrated. But nonetheless, there it is, a decent movie. Yep.